Well, hello, it's Robert again, and it's nice to be back. And wanted to share a few nice country classic LPs with you this evening. I'm going to start off by this one. Actually, it's playing in the background now. One of the very important country albums from 1956. That's the original of it. Was the Louvin Brothers' Tragic Songs of Life. Featured their versions of Kentucky, Let Her Go, God Bless Her, In the Pines, A Tiny Broken Heart, and others. Just powerful singing. Fine album all the way. The next one I have is one of the very early King Country albums of Grandpa Jones. My favorite on is Send In Your Name and Address. These are all late 40s, early 50s King recordings. Uncle Eve's Got the Coon is also on here. It's Raining Here This Morning, Mountain Dew, Old Rattler, 8 More Miles to Louisville, a number of his very well-known standards. This is a nice album from the mid-50s, Webb Pierce, Just Imagination. Now, none of the songs on here were hits. They had been released on a couple Decca albums prior. This featured songs that hadn't been released, but it's that classic Webb Pierce sound. Things like I Found a True Love, Just Imagination, I Love You Dear, Too Late to Worry Now. This is that classic Webb Pierce sound of the time, and these recordings were mostly made in the early and mid-50s. And we got a nice one that doesn't quite live up to the picture. It's Gene Autry. It's a fine album. Bear Family put this album back in the 80s. It's a picture disc, actually. And of course, Gene Autry is noted for his Western-style songs. This album actually features his early 30s hillbilly style, where he's doing some Jimmy Rogers style. Things like Bearcat Papa Blues, Money Ain't No Use Anyway, Do Right Daddy, Black Bottom Blues, Yellow Rose of Texas, and others. So fine listen, do not be pulled by the cover. This is some real classic stuff here. And we have from the mid-60s, classic Buck Owens sound of the time. The singing I Don't Care is a hit on here. Don Rich sang Dang Me and Louisiana Man, and Tom Brumley did the instrumental of Bud's Bounce. A number of fine Buck Owens, excellent album from that time. And then we have Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper. County produced this in cooperation with Columbia in the late 70s. It featured their early 50s sound. Sunny Side of the Mountain, Can You Forget, All on Account of You, You Tried to Ruin My Name. They had an excellent band at the time. None of these became chart hits. But they had Tex Logan was their fiddle player, and Joe Stewart played the mandolin. Buck Graves was the dobro player at the time. So you get a lot of fine music from the Clinch Mountain Clan with Wilma Lee and Stoney. One of the early RCA albums of Dolly Parton, this came out in '69, was My Blue Ridge Mountain Boy. This is the only album I think features her husband, picture of him on the cover. Of course, My Blue Ridge Mountain Boy was the Papa recording, but there also was Daddy Until Death Do Us Part, Big Wind, and others. But it's that classic late 60s country Dolly Parton sound when she was back with the Porter Wagoner Show. Very early Columbia album, released around 57, featured recordings in the early 50s and mid-50s. Carl Smith. Again, none of these were hits, but it featured his style of that time. If You Want It, I Got It is a highlight. Lovin' Is Livin', Oh No, and others. But it's that classic Carl Smith sound with Johnny Seibert doing the steel guitar work. And then one of the early 60s releases on Camden of Hank Snow. Camden was nice because they would release a lot of the early recordings while the current would appear on RCA. So you could get some real gems on these albums. You get the early 50s Hank Snow sound. Why Do You Punish Me? And You Pass Me By. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And of course the title cut, The Last Ride, which was a hit for him in '59. Then we have the first 12-inch. This is Hank Thompson album. Hank Thompson and Brothers Valley Boys. This album came out in early 50s. Of course, featured Wild Side of Life. His recordings of Letter Edged in Black and Little Rosewood Casket. But it's a fine album of his style of the time. Then in the early 60s, one of the premier bluegrass acts on King Records was Charlie Moore and Bill Napier. Guitar picking truck driver was on this. Bow to Christopher Columbus, their version of Talk of the Town, My Sweet Kentucky Mountain Home, Very fine album. Of course, Charlie Moore went on to a solo career in the late 60s and 70s until his death. But this is some of the early work with Bill Napier. They made a number of albums on King, and this is one of the best. Another popular female singer of the 60s was Norma Jean. She played on the Porter Wagoner show before Dolly Parton. In fact, Porter Wagoner wrote the liner notes of this album. This came out in 65. It was recordings she made in 64. Things like I Cried All the Way to the Bank. I Wouldn't Buy a Used Car from Him. Go Cat Go. This came out right after the album that featured Let's Go All the Way. Norma Jean actually began recording for Columbia in the late 50s, but this is one of her earlier RCA albums. A nice album of a bluegrass band in the early 50s, a little more obscure, but they recorded for the Blue Ridge label and the Richardtone label with the Church Brothers. This was an album released years ago in Germany. It's a heavy, thick record too. Good, excellent sound quality. Their version of Roll My Sweet Baby's Arms is on here, but they had a lot of original material as well. You're Still the Rose of My Heart, No One to Love Me, Daydreaming, Broken Vows and a Broken Heart. It's well worth a listen to hear this band. And then we have Don Reed and Red Smalley. An album released in around 61. Featured their popular recording of Love Please Come Home. Don Reed's banjo was spotlighted on San Antonio Rose, Steel Guitar Rag, Tennessee Stump, and Pick and Hold. And there's a few other songs on here as well. One of the fine classic Reno and Smalley albums. And then we have the Hillmen. This was a band in the early 60s. They recorded an album's worth of material that was not released. Why? I do not know. Vern Gosdin was their lead singer. Chris Hillman was their mandolin player. And of course, a little while after this, he went on to help found the rock group The Byrds. But this is a classic bluegrass sound. Their version of Fair and Tender Ladies, Rollin' Muddy River, Ranger's Command, Prisoner's Plea. But an excellent album. Vern Gosdin is the singer on it, who was well known in country music and years later. Rex Gosdin was the bass player, and Don Parmley was the banjo player. So these guys were pretty much well known, but it's an excellent album. This is the first release of this album was on the Together label. And then finally, as I've often said, in about 40 years of collecting, the hardest thing I have getting in the country field, it seems like, are the 10-inch albums of country. When you do find them, they're all beat up, and they're not worth it. I did finally get one. This is a near mint condition, one of the early Chet Atkins albums, Stringing Along with Chet Atkins, and featured his original single recording of Main Street Breakdown along with 12th Street Rag, Oh by Jingo, and others. It came out in the early 50s. Excellent example of the early Chet Atkins sound. I also have the other one. He had two 10-inch albums. The other was Galloping Guitar. So this is a fine album. If you ever get those 10-inch country, you're really getting something. So anyway, that's what I have this evening. Hope you enjoyed looking at those few a little bit. And I hope your day's going good. Hope things are going good for you. And I hope you're taking care of yourself. And I look forward to sharing some more things with you from that good classic country sound. And at this time, I'll let the Louvin brothers take us on out of here.
My friends all tried to get me up, but none could go my bail. I'm here to waste my life away down in this dirty old jail, because I murdered that Knoxville girl, the girl I love so well.
So long for now.